Okay, well, we've got quite a few people joining our webinar now. So welcome everybody to the Climate Wise Communities Bushfire Ready webinar for Gordon East and St Ives. My name is Lauren and I'm from the Environment Sustainability team at Ku-ring-gai Council. I'm coming to you today from Darramurruga land, and on behalf of Ku-ring-gai Council, I'd like to pay respects to our past Aboriginal custodians of the land. We recognise the First Nation people's care and connection with country, and we hope to learn from their knowledge. And before we start, some basic housekeeping. This session will be recorded and uploaded to our sustainability webinars page. If you have any technical issues during the webinar, please use the chat box for technical issues. And if you've got a question for one of our panelists, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Our panelists here with us today are my colleagues from Ku-ring-gai Council, Dr. Jenny Scott, our Sustainability Program Leader, and Mark Schuster, our Strategic Bushfire Officer. And from RFS Kalara Brigade, we have Captain Andrew Wilson. Now, to start off with, I'm just going to launch a pre-workshop poll. So all we ask you to do here is to answer as many of these questions as you can in the next few minutes. The answers are all completely anonymous, so we won't be able to tell who's answered what, but it will help us to evaluate our workshop and work on what we can do better next time. So please just take a few minutes to fill in those answers. And while you're doing that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the Climate Wise Communities program. So it was developed in the wake of the 2009 Black Saturday bushfires. And it incorporates the findings from the Royal Commission. And one of the key findings was that very few people actually had a bushfire plan in place. And for those people that did, most of them did not work as they expected them to. So the aim of this workshop is to show you the worst case scenario in your local area and how you can prepare for it. So today we'll be taking you through some simulations on a device called a sim table. Now this was developed, it was acquired by Council in 2019 through a grant funded project. And the technology was developed in the US, but we can use it to simulate local conditions and fire behaviour, which we'll be doing tonight for the areas of Gordon and St Ives. And we'll also take you through some reconstructions of previous fires. We'll look at a major Californian fire and we'll look at the Gospers Mountain fire as well. So I'll hand over to Jenny now to take us through the campfire in California.
Great, thanks Lauren. So as Lauren said, we're going to look at the worst case scenarios. There's many to choose from, sadly, in a variety of different countries. But we've chosen this one that's in Butte County in Northern California, partly because SimTable has put the progression up there, meaning it's the actual footprint of the fire as it progressed on the day. And down the bottom of this map, you'll see that there's a date in American terms and time. So at the moment, it says that it's the 18th of the 11th, 2018. I hope that's right. 8th of the 11th, 2018, thank you. And the time is very early in the morning. So this particular fire ignited because of some fallen power lines. And the conditions leading up to this fire were very, very dry. There was a heavy grass cover because they'd had a wet autumn, an unusually dry period since that autumn, decreased humidity for some of the recent winds. So there's winds coming off the desert, and so it's very low humidity, unusually dry fuel, and hot and gusty winds made it a red flag warning day. Now, a red flag warning day is similar to our catastrophic warning day. So people were very much aware that this was going to be a dangerous weather day. So when the fire ignited at 6:15 in the morning, the fire trucks were dispatched to go up and quickly get that fire out. They couldn't send any aerial appliances up because the winds were blowing at above 85 kilometres an hour, so the planes couldn't fly with those wind speeds. So the tankers went up, but they found that the winding mountain roads were too tight for them to get their tankers in. So this fire actually ran unchecked for the first few hours. So we're going to start watching this fire progress. And the town that we're particularly interested in is the township of Paradise, which you can see there, Lauren's pointing to it. And you'll see now there's some spot fires have started well ahead of the fire front. Now these spot fires are around in an area called Ku-ring-gai, and people were ringing 911 and saying, look, we can see all this smoke, what's going on? And they were told that the main fire front was well to the north of the town and they had nothing to worry about. And in a very short space of time, this fire travelled 20 kilometres to start spot fires on the western side of Paradise. Now you can see those little spot fires, they're gradually getting bigger and closing in around Paradise. Get a look at my notes. The community of Ku-ring-gai just issued evacuation orders, just getting people out of the way. But in Paradise, they didn't issue any evacuation orders until later in the morning. But calls were coming in over the next hour at the rate of 1 per minute to the emergency services. And there were only 2 people on the emergency services line. And so those 2 people, as this time went on and the threat got greater and greater, had to deal with thousands of calls coming in with people asking them what should they do and can we have a fire truck and do you know this is happening. So about 8 a.m. the fire had entered the eastern areas around the township of Paradise. Several minutes later, the Butte County Sheriff's Department issued evacuation orders for the entire town. Wind speeds were now growing and allowing the fire to grow with it. The urban firestorm that spread from building to building was independent of vegetation. They were just buildings catching fire because the neighbouring buildings were catching fire. Most of the residents from Ku-ring-gai and many from Paradise were unable to evacuate before the fire arrived. And you can see here that the main exit routes to the south have been cut. The main exit route to the west has been cut. And it's also just about to cut off the main exit route to the north. So according to the California fire chief in his dispatch, he said the fire has pretty much wiped out the community of Paradise. It's that kind of devastation. The winds predicted came and it's just wiping us out. The first 4 hours of the fire saw a cascade of failures in the emergency alert system, rooted in a patchwork system with an opt-in nature and compounded by the loss of 17 cell phone towers. There were many points of failure in this fast-moving fire, and with a fire like this, the only way to make sure people stay safe is there's no room for error. And as you can see, the errors were occurring quite quickly. Thousands of 911 calls inundated the 2 emergency dispatches. Emergency alerts suffered from human error as city officials failed to include 4 at-risk areas in the city for evacuation orders. Technical errors on the day meant that the emergency alerts failed to reach 94% of the residents of Paradise. In the first 4 hours of the campfire, it caused 86 civilian deaths, with 12 civilian and 5 firefighters injured. There was 18,804 structures destroyed, 62,053 hectares burnt. with a total damage bill of 16.5 billion, of which 4 billion was in the form of uninsured losses. The town of Concow and Paradise were destroyed, and the estimated losses was that 95% of the buildings had been wiped out. And the only reason this fire was put out in the end was due to heavy rain on the 21st of November. So as you can see, this fire, even though America is one of the most prepared countries for handling wildfire, you can see what has happened here in that all their systems started to fail. It was that perfect storm of failures. And so the losses were very heavy. But interestingly, or sadly, that's now not the worst fire in American history. It was up until earlier this year. The worst fire in American history now is the La Niña fire in Hawaii in 2023. So whether you're counting lives lost, whether you're counting buildings lost or areas burnt, these type of fires have a massive impact on communities. Some of them never come back. Some people just never go back to these areas just because of the trauma they suffered in being there during one of these catastrophic events. So this kind of fire, Andrew, would you like to comment on whether this is something that could happen in Ku-ring-gai?
Yeah, sure. This is very typical sort of fire, and yes, it's quite possible that this sort of fire could occur on the North Shore of Sydney. They have the very similar bushfire weather conditions, hot temperature, very low humidity, and that strong wind, in our case, coming from the northwest, and that's what they had in this situation. And we have those combination of events as well on those very high and catastrophic fire danger days. And given the proximity of houses and people to the bush, it's a big risk that we all do face in this area.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, any comment from you on this?
Yeah, I suppose I go around monitoring all the fuel loads around our LGA after 3 years. I suppose most of our fuel loads are pretty well up there at the top. We've done a fair bit of planned burning or prescribed burning in certain high-risk spots. We have a burn team and we work really well with RFS and also fire and rescue in our burns, but we can only get around so many areas. The thing I will emphasise tonight is not just the radiant heat from a fire front, but the embers that travel many, many kilometres and can lodge in the leaves in your gutter under your eaves anywhere. So we have to be wary of that. So yeah, when a fire comes, we're the third most fire-prone LGA in New South Wales. So yeah, it's just when, I suppose. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess we saw from the campfire just how far ahead of the fire front those embers can ignite more fires, which is part of the problem as to why it's so difficult to predict where these fires are going to go and when, because you just don't know where an ember's going to land. And if they land on the roof of a house, as happened in the Canberra fires, the fire front was well away from the urban area, but the embers came blowing through and ignited one house, which ignited another house, and that house-to-house transfer was a cause of major losses in Canberra. So we're going to have a look now at an event that happened in 2019, 2020, because it went for such an extended period, just to demonstrate that the behaviour of these fires can be so hard to predict and say when and where they're going to move. And it was very close to home. So this is the Gosford Mountain fire we're going to show you this time, which started up in the Blue Mountains. And this fire did some quite unusual things. And I've no doubt Andrew will tell us his first-hand experience with this fire. It wasn't your average fire. It did things that firefighters had never seen before. So, and some of the things that have been happening in that 2019-2020 is normally the firefighters can have a bit of a rest of the night because the fires die down a bit. But in that fire era, that time, those fires burning overnight just as fiercely as they burnt during the day, which is a little bit of a first. Is that right, Andrew?
Yes, that's right. We saw a number of occasions where activity was strong in the evening when we expected to drop off, and also that fire would come back through areas that it had previously burnt out, several days later, which was very unusual as well.
Right. So I'm going to ask Lauren to start the progression for the Gosper Mountain fire. And I'll do my best to keep up with what happens as the fire progresses. It's an interesting fire because nothing happens for ages and then all hell breaks loose and then nothing happens again. So when you're looking at a progression, you've got to try and speed it up in between the times it's not doing much to get to the times when it did do a lot, which is why Lauren can vary the speed of this progression so we don't have to sit here for 3 months and watch the fire burn. So that's where it ignited, and it was due to a lightning strike, and as obviously by the name of it, Gosper Mountain. And the ABC did a documentary and showed the point at which it struck, and it basically knocked a tree down, hit a tree, and the tree ignited, and off it went. Now again, you can see the time and date stamped down the bottom. So we're on the 27th of the 10th, 2018. So it started in that late spring, early summertime. Now the fire progressed reasonably quickly in that first 24 hours. And you can see the scale that we're looking at it. That fire is actually progressing very quickly. So it's gone already about 3 kilometres. And it follows the slope, like it will burn along ridge lines, particularly because that's where the wind is driving it. And when it goes down into the valleys, it'll slow down a little. And then as it goes up onto the next ridge, it will pick up again. And so the ridge lines are very vulnerable points where the opportunity for the embers to be produced and blow are particularly evident when those fires reach ridges. Now you can see that the fire is expanding rapidly, and we might just zoom in so you get a better idea of just how quickly this fire is moving. So you can see the yellow is the fire front, and the red is fully involved in fire. And after a while, that red colour deepens and goes black. And that's the fully burnt out area. So at this point in time, Andrew, what was RFS doing?
Well, in our area in the northern part of Sydney, this was one of many fires burning around the state at the time. We weren't too involved in it, to be honest. It was burning for several weeks, and it got to a point where it became at risk of jumping across the Hawkesbury River, and that's when we did get involved, and we had many evenings across quite a lengthy period of backburning, heading up towards Wiseman's Ferry in the evenings to backburn across on the other side of the Hawkesbury River. So this was a campaign that involved many hundreds of firefighters from all parts of Sydney for quite an extensive period.
And at the same time, this is only one of dozens of fires burning at that time.
Yes, the typical pattern for that for every fire season really, but what we'd seen in this 2019, late part of 2019, was that a lot of fire activity had started in the northern part of the state and had gradually spread south. And it was around October, November that the outskirts of Sydney started to experienced some fire activity, and we all remember in the early part of November that fire in North Turramurra, when all the pink material was dropped on the roofs of several houses there. It was just at that point that concern arose over the Scospers Mountain fire and its likelihood of coming across the Hawkesbury River.
Right, thank you. Okay, so again, similar conditions to the campfire preceded this fire. It was on the back of a record-breaking drought. And so the bush was very dry. And that's a key thing to remember, is the dryness of the fuels really is a major factor in bushfire risk. So the winds also, for this particular fire, meant helicopters were restricted from flying, and deploying firefighting teams was done as and when needed, when it was getting close to populations. The wind speeds generally averaged over this period of this fire to 60 to 70 kilometres an hour, so it allowed the fire to move very quickly through the terrain. The high winds continued, and after 2 weeks, there was a rain event which slowed the fire right down. Now, it was close to being put out, but a change in weather conditions causes the fire to rise up again and head southeast, travelling up to 12 kilometres in one day. Now, 12 kilometres in one day might not sound a lot, but in fire terms, that's a real run. That's a very quick fire. The 12th of November had been declared a catastrophic fire day, you'll remember, and another fire to the southwest is travelling very fast and creating its own weather. A pyrocumulus nimbus forms, and the RFS volunteers witnessed lightning strikes, and which started more spot fires. Now you'll see coming up soon there are a few spot fires started, and some of them are a considerable distance from the fire front, which is what we were saying about with the Camp Creek fire, that those people were caught unawares of how quickly it travelled. Well, this is going to sleep at this point, this fire, because of that little bit of rain. But it's going to very quickly come alive again. And of course, what causes these other fires to ignite wasn't just ember attacks, it was also lightning strikes from dry weather storms that were in the area at the time. So any moment now there should be some, there's one, started to the southwest. And there you can see how quickly the embers are progressing ahead of the fire front. As the fire progresses, the embers are travelling ahead of the fire front and starting spot fires. The embers can travel up to 10 kilometres ahead of the fire front, depending on the wind speeds, and embers are responsible, as Mark said, for 80% of house losses in bushfires. The storm activity that leads to a microburst in Gordon, and if you ever do our storm workshop, you'll see a video of that. So those microbursts are like our supercell storms, very intense but don't affect a large area, which snapped healthy trees and flattened cars and caused blackouts. This storm and lightning activity started new fires to the northwest of this fire. So you can see now, way up there to the northwest, are new fires starting to build very rapidly, and that's up around the Wollombi area. And they're also building at a very fast rate. So more spot fires also, whoops, something went wrong there. Yeah, we're just recovering to the point where we were when the computer decided to take over and do something strange.
Reset it.
Yep, we'll just reset it. Okay, so more spot fires started to the southwest, as you can see. They're joining up with the main fire front. And there's another spot fire to the southwest, which quickly joins up. And those fires to the northwest are growing exponentially. And they're all starting to join up as well. And this is where the term megafire was first used in Australia. These fires all join up to be one massive fire. So around the 5th of December, the other fires in the northeast join with the Gosford Mountain Fire and form the mega blaze. Later on, it also joined the Paddock Run and Thompson Creek fires, which you can see off there to the right. At 2:54 p.m, the first spot overs started around the Mount Wilson backburn area. Then within 30 minutes, crews were doing property protection. So there was a backburn lit with the intention that it would protect houses, but because the wind changed, that then itself became another fire front. The fire crews worked hard to stop the fire jumping the Hawkesbury River. So if we just zoom in, we'll just see how close it came to jumping the Hawkesbury River. Now you can see the river snaking its way through the landscape down there. And you can see the fire has burnt right down to the river at one point. Andrew, were you there when that fire did that?
Yes, I spent many evenings up there, as did many of our members, back burning there, and just really across the river from Wiseman's Ferry, across on that other side around St Albans and Lower and Upper MacDonald. I spent many evenings up there, back burning, as you say, towards the north and west, back towards the origin point of the fire, to try and put a containment around it.
All right, thank you. So by this stage, strike teams from interstate and overseas were also joined in the battle against this fire. Plans were made for the evacuation of Hornsby and the Hills District, because if this fire got over the river, that's where it was going to head because of the prevailing winds. And what would have subsequently happened is, would have, had the weather not changed, burned on through the north side of Ku-ring-gai there. Experts estimate the fire could have covered the distance from Wiseman's Ferry to the urban fringe of Hornsby and Ku-ring-gai in just one day. So there wouldn't have been a lot of warning and preparation by this time. This is very possible considering the speed and the distance of the earlier fire runs. Fortunately, a southerly wind came and blew the flames back, helping the fire crews to contain the fire. This highlights the fact that the fire can move extremely quickly and could potentially lead to mass evacuations, which are unlikely to go smoothly if people are not prepared. Embers can travel, in this case, went up to 20 kilometres ahead of the fire front, and starting new fires would likely complicate the matters down in Ku-ring-gai. And in fact, there would be nothing to stop this fire burning all the way through to the coast had the weather conditions not changed. Even though the fire is contained in the Hawkesbury, it begins to threaten Lithgow, where more homes are lost. And it wasn't until February 8th that rain put the Gosford Mountain Fire out. The wide-scale power outages in Ku-ring-gai were experienced during that time because it was a drought ending with an extreme rainfall event. I don't know if you remember it, but it was very intense. In fact, it was so intense, the Warragamba Dam went from 40% full on the back of a drought to 90% full in 2 days. That just is how it shows you how much rain fell at that time. But the fortunate thing was it did put the fire out. And so Hornsby and Ku-ring-gai and Hills District and areas right down to the northern beaches were very lucky to have escaped that bullet. So when we do our bushfire plan, this is the kind of event that we want you to think about. If you're prepared for an event of this scale, then if it's a smaller fire or a less intense fire or a fire that's not moving as quickly, you'll be able to handle it regardless because you're prepared for the big one. So what we're going to do now is we are going to look at simulating that kind of an event in Ku-ring-gai. Was there any comments, Mark, you or Andrew wanted to make towards the end of that Gosford Mountain fire?
Yeah, we had similar scenes up in Queensland, but because we're west of the Great Divide, I suppose the media attention wasn't focused. But in our national parks and state forests, we lost over 500,000 hectares of good forest country, and we had many ancient rainforests that were devoured by fire where fire had never been before. So very similar in sub-coastal Queensland to down here. The only problem, the big difference here is that we have the population up against pretty volatile vegetation. So, yeah, we should always be vigilant. That's my sort of view.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to, that's Ku-ring-gai there, the north side of Ku-ring-gai. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit to the area that we're concentrating on tonight, which is Gordon East and St Ives. We'll just show you. Maybe Lauren can point to Gordon East and St Ives.
You can see the Pacific Highway and Mona Vale Road coming up along. Yep. So you can locate yourself. Eastern Arterial Road.
If you have a look there, you might be able to actually find your house. With any luck. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to burn a fire through that area. And we're going to get you to think about what you would be doing. We're going to say it's a Tuesday and there has been a catastrophic fire warning. And you've got to think about where you are going to be likely on a Tuesday and what sort of preparations you might be able to make. So you might be at work on a Tuesday. So is there someone at home who can, if you have pets, get the pets out, or the children, get the children out, or if you have elderly parents living in the area, how might you get them out? And as the fire progresses, you'll see that the emergency services only have a certain capacity, and it is going to fall to you, the homeowner, in these massive events to be able to take care of yourself and your loved ones. So we're going to help you work through a process of doing that.
You can see it's only been just on an hour now since that fire started. It could have been kids playing in the bush after a few months of fairly dry weather. So the fuels are certainly there. So you can see it progressing now.
Yep. The fire's lit and away it goes. And at this point, Andrew, what would RFS be doing?
Generally on a catastrophic fire day, so normally a day before or 2 days before, there's that prediction that it is going to be a catastrophic fire danger, characterized by the very high temperature, low humidity, and strong likelihood of wind from the northwest. Generally, with those sort of situations, the RFS does quite a bit of preparation and planning. Even though we're all volunteers, on those sorts of days, we would ask members to stand by at fire stations to be ready just in case there is an outbreak of some sort. We'd have some organisation around what groups we're going to work in and be helping get the message out to the community around the fire danger and, you know, making sure that people are aware how they should be keeping themselves up to date during the day.
All right, thank you. And Mark, what would council be doing?
Yeah, we have, of course, our local emergency management committee formed of council, police, the fire agencies, and also national parks. We get together and particularly work out where are the hot spots, where are the pinch points or hard points when people want to evacuate, how to get people through those. So the police becomes a critical agency to let people through lights and that type of thing. But you could see the fire quickly going towards the interface, the bushland-urban interface. The gullies might slow it down a bit in that Stony Creek catchment because there's almost rainforest gullies, but given high temperatures, strong winds, anything will really burn in these new types of wind-driven fires as opposed to past fires. So you can see it's spreading pretty rapidly. We're at about 5 to 6 hours now, so that's if no agencies are containing it. But of course, we have the agencies close at hand.
Yes, and the thing you've got to remember, this might not be the only fire that's burning in the area. There could be others, which means the resources are stretched very thinly. So to help you plan, we'll just stop the fire there for a moment. And to help you plan for what you're going to be able to do, you need a really good quality bushfire plan. So we're just going to walk you through the ClimateWise process, and the ClimateWise tools are designed for you to gather information that's going to be really important to your bushfire plan. And it won't be just clean your gutters and rake up around your house the leaves, etc. It will be much more comprehensive than that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to work out, well, what are the risks associated with our location? So we go to the first step and we put in an address. We're going to put in an address in your area. And you'll see it comes up as a little outline of the block, the property. And it shows you what the threats are. So if we scroll down, this particular property has bushfire hazard and ember attack are a problem. It doesn't have exit issues, which means there's more than one road in and out. If that box is ticked on yours, that automatically tells you you need to leave early. And when I say early, perhaps the day before a fire starts. So if you know there's a catastrophic fire warning for the following day, you might choose to go out that morning and do something else for the day so that you know you're not going to get trapped in your home if a fire does start. Most properties in Ku-ring-gai are vulnerable to storm and heat wave as well. So everybody's risk will be those two boxes ticked. Now, this planning tool isn't just for bushfire. It also does heat, storm and flood. But we're only talking about bushfire tonight. Although, given the weather, we probably should be talking about storm. Okay, the second step is to look at your personal situation and just see what are the factors that are going to influence the resilience of your property and the key issues in your bushfire plan, like when should I leave? So the first one is, do you live alone or with others? And whichever box you tick, it will come up with advice about why that's important to your bushfire plan. So if you live with others, everybody in the household should be involved in making the bushfire plan. It's no good just one person doing it, and it needs to be in hard copy as well as electronic form so that everybody can access it easily. Talks about the people in your household, whether there are children, elderly, people with special needs. All of these will require you to have certain things in place to look after the children if you have to evacuate, and how to, if they're elderly or people with disabilities, or as is the next question, health and medical conditions in the household. If you have to evacuate, what medical equipment do you need to take, or what medicines do you need to take? So whether or not you have your own transport, whether there are pets, the English proficiency in the household, and if you know that your neighbours might not be so proficient in English, it's probably worth, if an event does occur, checking with them to see if they understand what's going on and whether they need help, if you're in a position to provide help. Very important to remember with the phone connections that if you've just got a mobile phone, and as happened in the campfire, the 17 cell phone towers came down. If that happens here, the same problem will occur. We won't get any any mobile activity. And if the power goes out, then we don't have any landline either. So you can't totally rely on being informed using either your mobile or a landline. You've got to have a backup to that. Some place you can go to get information about what's happening out there in the big wide world, and that is the ABC, is the official emergency broadcasting station. So if all you've got left is a car radio or a transistor radio, that's where you'll get your information from. So you save all that information that you've just gone through then to a PDF, and that's all yours. You download it to your computer. Council doesn't want to know about it. That's your own private information. And so there's no copies kept by us. So we'll just go back to the fire for a moment. So remembering that we talked about the risk, and most of you people, if not all of the people that are listening tonight, will be in a bushfire prone area or an area prone to ember attack. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit closer, and we'll get the fire going again. That's the beauty of the sim table. You can stop and start the fire to talk about it. Now you can see already there are thousands, well, perhaps hundreds of properties affected by this fire, and a couple hundred more right over the other side of the valley in the fire front. Now, as we talked about before, these fires, as the wind picks up, which you can see on the top left-hand corner of the map, there is a blue wheel with an arrow. And that arrow allows Lauren to adjust the wind speed and direction. And at the moment, it is blowing at 46 kilometres an hour. So it will pick up as time goes on. And of course, as we talked about with the campfire, as the wind speeds do pick up, the spot fires start happening further and further ahead of the fire front. So that's the other issue you have to remember, that we have no way of knowing where these fire fronts, where this ember attack will ignite another fire. And by the way, we're not saying this is the fire that's going to affect your area. This is just one of 1,000 different ways this fire could affect this area. So this is just a hypothetical, but something that's useful for planning.
Actually, Jenny and listeners, there is a fire tool called Phoenix, which RFS uses and many fire practitioners use to simulate thousands of fires in the landscape and then come up with average type fires for different weather conditions. So yeah, Phoenix, and actually Council has some Phoenix runs that we use to try and find out the real fire paths. But as Jenny mentioned, every fire is truly different, depending on so many factors: fuels, topography, winds, humidity, temperature, just on and on. Very hard to predict.
Andrew, you got anything to add at this point?
Well, in terms of what the RFS might be doing at this point, having been called to this fire, around the point of origin, we're not going to be going into the bush to try and tackle it. It's simply not going to be possible with catastrophic fire conditions. It's simply not going to be possible to put out this fire. Our priority is going to be protecting lives, making sure that the community is aware that a fire has started, and we'll also be looking at property protection and trying to assess what the areas of risk are, say in half an hour's time, 1 hour's time, 2 hours' time, and making sure that enough warning as much as possible is sent out to the community in those areas.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so we're going to make the wind speed pick up a little more. And so it's going to go up to 81 kilometres an hour. Now you can see how the fire, a whole new fire front has started on the other side of the East Killara there. So not only do the RFS and Fire and Rescue have to look at all these potential houses burning on the East Killara, but they're down into Gordon as well. And you wouldn't think it could cross that area, but it very easily can, just by virtue of those embers. You can see that there's still some houses burning, or vegetation in between houses burning up on that north side there. But there is a fully fledged fire front down the bottom, down the southern end, as well as the one that started with the spot fires. Now, it's gone very quickly, the one down the south that started from the spot fires, and it's crawling its way through the suburbs as well. So we're just going to stop there briefly, and we're going to look at the next issue around your bushfire plan, and that's going to be, how do you know whether your property is defendable, and whether or not stay and defend is even an option, a realistic option for you, or is it just a suicide mission? So first of all, we get people to draw a bit of a mud map of their properties and put the key things that might affect a fire, anything that might be volatile around the property, but also some of the strengths as well. Like if you've got a pool, and with that pool you have a pump and a fire hose, that's a strength. So some people have water tanks that are completely dedicated to firefighting. So that's another tick if you had one. So looking at the strengths and the weaknesses of the property gives you a bit of an idea, first of all, just a hint of whether your property is something that you could stay and defend. The other aspect, of course, is whether or not you're physically fit and able to withstand the conditions that would exist during this. Andrew, what are the conditions like when you're fighting a fire?
Well, in line with the weather that you would expect on a catastrophic fire day, very hot temperature, strong wind, a low humidity. You know, it really is quite tough. And if you are going to be anywhere near the fire and try and look after your property, you really want to be properly dressed for that sort of activity, which means, you know, completely cover all skin, wear some sort of protection on your head, sturdy shoes and that sort of thing. So all that sort of extra clothing that you would sensibly wear in that sort of environment is going to add to the feeling of very, very warm, hot day and hot sort of weather. And it's going to be a case of, you know, contending with that and keeping yourself hydrated as much as possible by drinking plenty of water. That for firefighters in bushfires is one of the key risks we face. It's around that dehydration and looking after yourself and keep drinking plenty of water to try and stave off the effects of that intense heat that you're encountering.
And I believe, you know, where you see lots of reports where they say it just goes totally dark and the embers are just thick in the air. So it makes it very difficult to breathe, no doubt.
Yes, the classic sort of conditions of the fire front passing over is that you're caught up in an ember shower. So yes, the embers can be blowing 10, even 20 kilometres ahead of the fire front in the right sort of conditions, and that's a big risk in terms of impact on houses. But much closer to the fire, you're going to experience quite a heavy sort of shower of embers coming down on you. So that's one thing. And it's just a very challenging sort of environment. Yes, the intense smoke often means that the sun is blocked out, and it does go quite dark for quite a period of time as the fire front passes through.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So what we're looking at here is, how do you evaluate your house in terms of resilience? And we go through different sections of the house, and we look at the type of design and material that you might have in your house. So if it's coloured red, if that meets the best description of your house and it's got a red box beside it, that means it's a serious weakness. That's a kind of many re-entrant corners, this is the roof, where leaves and embers can collect, and a complex roof line with gables and valleys. That's a roof that's very likely to catch fire, because it can be difficult to get the leaves out of those little nooks and crannies. But almost certainly an ember will find those little nooks and crannies and ignite a fire on the roof there, which can then get into the roof itself and ignite the house itself. So we look at things, and you get to rate your property. If it's a simple roof that's made of metal, then it's pretty resilient in terms of bushfire. But if it's a complex roof, like we said before, it's tile pre-1980s with perhaps mortar that's not in the best condition. Yeah, very, very vulnerable roof. And so you can put into your plan, what are you going to do about your roof that you might be able to make it more, in this case, ember-proof. That's where the most losses occur. So that's what we're trying to do with our roof. We then look at whether or not you've got roof sprinklers, and the sprinklers that seem to perform the best are those that run around the gutter and actually have a shower of fine mist and water coming down, so that the embers get put out before they hit the windows and penetrate in under the eaves, etc. The ones on the roof line, on the ridge line, are less effective, but still better than nothing. So you go through all this, and eaves and fascia boards are somewhere where embers often get, and things like vents and weep holes and the chimney. If air can go up through the chimney, it can also come down, because as the fire front approaches, the interesting thing is that such a super hot air coming at your house, and your house is comparatively cool inside, it creates a vacuum inside your house. And so your house starts sucking air into it from outside. And if that air is full of embers and they just come down through the chimney or penetrate however into your lounge room or your kitchen or your garage, and ignites a fire, then there goes the house. And that's a very common way it happens. But it is also often the case that fires occur, houses catch fire after the fire front has passed, because the embers get sucked in there and they're just bubbling away, a little fire, and you might think, yep, we got past that all right. But in fact, if you go away and come back in an hour's time, your house is just a few bits of cinder. So we get you to go through all the aspects of your house and rate it according to its resilience. And that will give you a bit of an idea. If you're ticking lots of red boxes and very few green boxes, the chances are you wouldn't want to stay and defend. Your best option there is to make sure you're well insured, because trying to save a house like that would be a fool's errand. Whereas if it's a house with lots of green boxes, then the chances are it might be defendable. And Andrew, that's the sort of thing that the RFS looks at when they have to make those very hard decisions about which house do they defend. Is that right?
Sometimes that becomes a factor, but ideally everyone's done some good protection preparation, I should say, on their property, and that makes our job easier. But it is unfortunate in some situations that where houses are not well prepared, and because of their location in a very close proximity to the bush, that unfortunately they're at a higher risk of being impacted quite significantly.
The
Yeah.
other thing, Jenny, is many of our houses were built at the interface, the bushland interface, well before the bushfire planning laws came in. So unless you retrofitted a house, many houses are fairly vulnerable. And I'll talk about BAL ratings afterwards, but just be aware of that many of our houses are the older housing stock, which can really suffer in a bushfire-prone area.
Thanks, Mark. Yes. We also look at the exterior of the property, so the landscaping and what sort of fencing you might have. As you noticed on that little mud map that we showed you earlier, there was a line of pencil pines making a nice line up to the house. And of course, they ignite fairly easily, and that would be like a wick to a candle. So they're the sorts of things that you've got to think about with your landscaping, and Mark will tell us in a little while some tips about how you can reduce the risk of the landscaping igniting the house. There's also about the gas bottle. It has a relief valve, whether it's your barbecue or gas for the house. And if the bottles are positioned properly, the vents, the little relief valve, should be pointing away from the house, because gas bottles are designed, when they get superheated, to release the gas through that relief valve, which will ignite and shoot a flame a couple of meters through the air. So if it's shooting a flame out, you want it to go out into the backyard. You don't want it to go into your house. Hence the way it's facing is so important. House age and standard, whether there's air conditioners. Interestingly, I saw a house in the 2019-2020 fires down the south coast that the house had completely been destroyed, but the air conditioner was still okay. So in some cases, the air conditioner can let the embers in, suck them in. And in other cases, as was this one, it probably wasn't turned on at the time. It was a bit of metal that resisted the embers getting into it. Doormats, you've got to think whether or not the doormats you have placed at your front door are combustible. You want a low flammability doormat, and best is to move the doormat away from the door, perhaps out into the backyard. So if it does catch fire, it won't set the rest of the house off. When you're thinking about your pets, if there's a chance that you won't be able to get home and get your pet, or it's not easy to relocate that pet, how can you set it up that your pet might survive a fire front coming through? And that can be making sure that it's got a shelter well away from any fuel, that it's secure in its fencing. Best if you can get someone in there to relocate it, but if you can't, you've got to do your best for your pet that you can. So then we look at the bowel rating, and this is where Mark and his expertise is particularly useful. Mark, what can you tell us about the bowel rating?
Yeah, this is an Australian standard, actually, the bushfire attack level, and it's measured in what they call kilowatts per square metre. Now, you can see the figures there, 19, 12.5, 40, 29, and flame zone, it's called FZ. And a human body for about 20 seconds can withstand up to about 6 to 7. That's only for 20 seconds. So you can imagine a bowel low comes up to about 12. That's still getting pretty high in terms of fire intensity. This is a fire intensity up against the walls of your house. Bowel 40, you wouldn't want to be there, even though your house is designed for it. You still wouldn't want to be in the house or flame zone during an intense fire. So these are the building standards. As I said, many residences in our interface along our 100 kilometres of interface only have a bowel low rating, so they can't really withstand a bushfire. If you did retrofitting, which we can talk about, and also if you did a DA, you're improving or upgrading your house to a higher bowel rating, then you take the resilience of the house up. And this is called hardening the interface. We might be on the other side doing a control burn or an asset protection zone in our bushland section, but this is in your property, trying to harden your side of the fence, so to speak, to make it more resilient. So I can talk to, as the cows come home, about bowel levels, but you'd have to ring me or email me. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Andrew, do you want to add anything to that about the house?
I just reiterate that good preparation of property is essential. It really can quite significantly reduce the risk that fire would impact a structure.
Right. And if someone is caught in their house, what's the best they can do to look after themselves in that situation?
Yeah, well, the key is you don't want to be caught outside during a bushfire passing over. The radiant heat is the biggest danger. You're much better off being in a sturdy structure to get away from that radiant heat, even if it's just for a short period. And in terms of which part of the house, obviously the fire generally is coming from the northwest, being driven by that wind. So you want to be at the other end of where the fire is coming from and give yourself the biggest possible time out of harm's way whilst that fire passes over.
And in terms of where in the house is it best to shelter?
Well, I think it's at the end opposite where the fire's coming from, but away from windows. Find a good sturdy part of the house near an exit, but keep away from windows, curtains, and other sort of gaps in the building, which are going to be a danger in terms of radiant heat or easy entry points for fire itself.
Mm.
You have to watch the smoke also. Smoke's another factor you may not be prepared for, heavy smoke.
Mm. And ideally, if the room you're sheltering in has 2 exits, one needs to be straight outside, but you can have another one to the inside. That's ideal because it allows you, if that side of the house for some reason ignites, you can move out to the rest of the house. Or if your exit out into the house, it's burning on the other side of the door, you can go straight outside. So when that fire burns over the house, you want to go outside after it's gone and just check whether or not you see any smoke coming out of your house, because that may mean that an ember has got lodged in the ceiling cavity and has ignited the roof space in there. So what we're going to do now, we're back with our fire and it's running full pelt. Get Lauren to start it up again. Now, what often happens later in the day on a hot summer's day is that the wind changes direction and a southerly buster rolls in. So we're going to swing the wind around to a southerly, and we're going to have it going full tilt. It's a real buster. And we're going to see how the fire responds. So built into this fire model that we're showing you is a bushfire tool called Anderson 13, and it reacts to the conditions on the ground. So the fuel type, the slope, the humidity, the temperature, the wind direction. And so we can see now that this model is showing us that all of a sudden it's hitting some upward slopes and traveling very fast in a completely different direction. So those people who thought that they'd escaped a bullet because the fire was over there, now they're right in the line of the fire front. And as a consequence, they may not have had a lot of time to be prepared and to get out of the way, which is really an essential thing. So you can see it burning very quickly through that area. And again, the embers are a problem because those southerlies, they burn at a massive rate. And we can see embers will be starting well ahead of the fire front and all up to the north there of St Ives and right up through through the national park will be in the firing line. So as the wind progresses and as the southerly progresses, what's the best advice now, Andrew, for those people who've suddenly got a spot fire on their doorstep?
Well, they're now at risk of direct impact from these flames. This is the same fire. It's obviously already split into two, but that sudden wind change, usually late in the afternoon, is going to open up that big fire front to the north. And people who maybe 2 hours earlier thought they had we're lucky and we're out of the way of this one, are suddenly facing the potentially the full impact of it bearing down on where they are. So they need to, just in general, maintain a good sort of situational awareness around the fire in their local area and to be prepared, even though it may seem not to be an immediate risk. Be prepared for some sort of sudden wind change like this that's going to drive the fire in a completely different direction.
Oh, thank you. Mark, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just really, really difficult with fire behaviour, the way it will swing around with southerly busters or changing winds. You just have to really, fire agencies really have to be prepared. But the big issue is evacuation routes. So the police have to really, be on hand to open up routes that might normally close or have significant traffic at school times, that type of thing, any events. So, yeah, evacuation can be a mammoth issue. Just everyone has to be really prepared.
And that's part of the reason why it's very difficult to say where an evacuation will take place and how it will take place, because they need to know what the fire's doing before they tell people to evacuate to a particular location. So, which is why you don't hear that much about evacuation prior to a fire starting. The other issue is, of course, if you've only got one road in and one road out, then there is no alternative to where you evacuate and how you evacuate. But you can, at the end of the day, do what we absolutely 100% recommend, and that's not be there. And if you're worried about choke points and traffic jams and will you be able to get out because of all the people, or what happens if a tree comes down across the road, that all isn't a problem if you're not there. Okay, so you need to leave early. That's the fundamental message of the night. Okay, we're just going to go back to Climate Wise, the last part of Climate Wise Communities, and it looks at whether or not you can work with your neighbours to understand the resilience of your neighbourhood when an emergency happens. Now, if you live in a neighbourhood where you don't know your neighbours, you don't know, if they are at work all day or whether they're at home all day or whether they've got kids or pets, this is a time and a good opportunity to all get together and talk about how you can help each other in an event. Now, some of the key things you need to be able to do is to know who you're going to notify that you have evacuated, and that's probably a relative. You also need to know where you're going to go, and that needs to be somewhere out of the bushfire hazard area. The other thing you want to know is who in your neighbourhood might be able to help you if you need help. So if you don't have your own transport, or if something happens where you need assistance, like one of the people we were talking to not long ago, she's a nurse, and she had 3 little boys, and the fire was approaching rapidly, so she got the 3 little boys in the car. They're just about to set up, and the neighbour runs across and says to her, "Can you come and help?" Because her son had just dropped something on his big toe and cut it off. And she needed someone to help to get him in the car and calm him down. And so no way of predicting when they're going to happen. But fortunately, she was able to help, and they did still get out in time. So working with your neighbours is really important. And knowing, if you're going to meet up outside the area, so everybody's got out. Fire and Rescue run a community fire unit program, and they are really good at doing this. Not only are they trained in defending houses against fire, but they're also trained in how you work with your neighbourhood in an emergency. But you can do that yourselves. Just answering these questions gives you a pretty good idea of the kinds of things that you need to talk to your neighbours about, and see if collectively you can come up with a plan that could be activated at any moment to help each other, not just for a bushfire. It might be a storm. It might be an extreme heat event where there are people in your area who you should check on and how they're coping with the heat. So that's that one. And again, it's the same with the other two. You download that information to a PDF and you keep it and you use it to make your bushfire plan. So we give you some links to some of the bushfire plan templates that are out there. Some of them they're fairly basic, but still you'll use most of the information that you've got from the Climate-Wise process. If you want to do a more comprehensive plan, then you can do it yourselves based on that information. What am I going to do to my property? How am I going to use the opportunity to plan with my family or the people who live with me about how we're going to function and what everybody's role will be on the day. What do we do with the pets? The Red Cross has a very good app that you can download and use for that purpose. And they also have a carers, it's not an app, it's a template that's especially designed for people who are caring for people with a disability to get them prepared and get out. So the very last thing we want to show you is the what if wheel. Now this what if wheel is derived from the information gathered, as Lauren said, during Black Saturday. So RMIT did a survey of people who were impacted by fire on Black Saturday. And those people, 5% of them said they had a plan. And when they said how effective was the plan, they almost all said it didn't work at all. And the reason it didn't work at all was because the fire didn't happen the way they thought it would happen. And so what this tool does is throw at you a whole lot of what ifs. What if you can't reach your elderly parents? What are you going to do then? How are you going to handle that situation? That needs to be thought out and put into your plan. And if we click it again, we'll come up with some other. The phone and the internet are down. how are you going to find out what's going on? And as we said before about the ABC 702 being the emergency broadcaster is ultimately the backup for that purpose. We'll just look at one last one, and you can, at your leisure, test your plan to see if it addresses the ones that are relative to you. Oh, it really likes that can't reach elderly parents tonight.
Parents are important, that's why, Jenny.
That's right. Okay, your pet's missing. Now, that's a very common one. People have gone to get their pet, and Kitty is hiding under the house because Kitty knows something's coming and is already quite alarmed. Or your dog is extremely stressed and has just taken off. And we have had more than a few people lose their lives by staying there and trying to rescue their pet or find their pet. So that's a really important one, that you have your pet contained well in advance of any need to evacuate, whether it be in a crate or on a lead, locked inside. Just make sure that you can find that pet when you need to. Okay, Andrew, anything I've missed?
No, I would just make 2 points. One is take the time to prepare your property. That's a key point. Cutting back the risky vegetation, cleaning up rubbish, and following the other advice around enhancements to your property. Second is do take the time to create a bushfire plan or a natural hazard plan. It's why you've got the time to give it some serious thought, that you're going to get the most out of it. It's too late when the fire's bearing down on you to trying to work out what you're going to do. It's a matter of putting the effort in to draw up the plan when you've got time. And I think one other point you made, which I think is really important, is to talk to fellow residents in the same street, in the same area. Working together is going to be a really valuable, provide a really valuable sort of outcome in this sort of scenario.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Mark, do you have any other points?
Yeah, I suppose even though we consider Gordon a beautiful inner leafy sort of Ku-ring-gai suburb, it's still very prone to potential fire and has been in the past, even though we've got some rainforest gullies there, which can add protection in normal fire seasons, but not in extreme or catastrophic times. I'm happy to come around and talk to groups of residents, as I do, about their houses and go for a bit of a walk with them looking at houses. And so, yeah, really happy to assist wherever I can. Anyway, thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, well, now I'm going to hand back to Lauren. She's going to tell you a little bit about the bushfire rebate program, and then we'll take some questions.
Great, thanks, Jenny. So I'm just going to go through some of the rebates that we have available here. So the easiest way to find information about them is to head to the Ku-ring-gai Council website, so kirg.nsw.gov.au. Now you can go in through the environment section, or you can just search the top bar of the website here, Bushfire Wise, and it will be the first one that comes up. So click on that link there, and that will take you to our Bushfire Wise rebate information page. So Council will actually provide rebates of up to $1,000 or 25% of many different actions you can take to retrofit your home to make it more resilient for bushfires. So you do need to complete a pre-approval form first of all, and somebody from Council will then be in touch to talk to you about the next steps. So please don't go just doing everything and expect that we'll pay for it. You do need to get your pre-approval in first. Now we do provide rebates for lots of different options, and I won't go through all of them, but you can see some of the most common ones are like installing sprinkler systems in the roof, replacing the ridge cap mortar, and installing metal gutter guards. That's a really good one as well. But there are a whole bunch of different things that you might do here. Now, if your home is on bushfire prone land, you may require either a CDC or a DA for retrofits, and you can get more information on those on the Council website and also on the RFS website as well. If you do need to do that, council will also pay 50% of approval costs to a maximum of $500. Now, these rebates are available once per household every 5 years. So yeah, we can have a look through this website, see if you do need development consent or not, and all of this information is available here. So once you've decided what you'd like to do, you can submit your pre-approval application. This is a pretty simple form. It doesn't ask you very much at all, just a few things to get the process started. The next step of it will be to provide some quotes and also step 3 of your ready check from the Climate Wise Communities website. So we want to see that you've made the plan and you've recognised what it is needs to be done to your house and that you're choosing something appropriate for that. So once you've done that, like I said, we'll be in touch and we can get the process going. Then you can go ahead, get those retrofits done, and then we will provide the rebate. So if you do have any questions, feel free. Like I said, we've got our panelists here for another few minutes. So if you do have anything that you'd like to ask, if you are not sure or you can't think of a question now, but you might think of one in an hour or so, or sometime down the track, you can come back to the Climate Wise Communities website, click on additional info, and then ask a local expert. So if you scroll down here, you can pop in your questions here and they will come through to council, and then we will get back to you whenever we can. Did anyone have any closing remarks before we finish off the webinar tonight? I'll just check that we don't have any other questions coming in through as well.
I've tried to answer some of them, so as best I could.
Yeah, I think the main message we're trying to get through to you is be prepared for the worst, and everything else will be taken care of after that. And remember the message, leave early. That is the key take home. Best not to be there, particularly where these big fires are affecting hundreds, if not thousands of houses. There is very unlikely a fire truck will be in your street. So you've got to be able to leave your house in a situation that you think it might survive, make sure your insurance is adequate, and then go to safety.
Great. So we do have another question coming here. How do you
I'm trying to type. I've lost your connection. Yeah, I've got no connection with you.
We can hear you okay, Mark.
Can you?
Yeah,
you
we
can
just
ask
had
me now.
Yeah, we just had a question about hazard
Yeah.
reduction burns in the Ku-ring-gai
Yeah.
area.
We prioritise them because actually in the last year we've caught up a lot on our hazard reduction burning after 3 years of wet weather, but we prioritise them in high risk areas, and I determine those high risk areas from our Phoenix scenario modelling of the fire runs. where the most critical areas are. And you have to remember we've got about 100 kilometres of bushland urban interface. So we've got a 5-year plan with RFS, Fire and Rescue and National Parks. It's called the Hornsby Ku-ring-gai Bushfire Management Plan. It's just been revised for the next 5 years. With those, we determine our burn areas. But you must remember, after 3 to 4 years after a burn, the fuel returns pretty rapidly, and there can be fuel build-up and risk at that stage. So they're only a short-term solution. They'll help lower intensity. That's the main thing, but they won't prevent total impact. Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Mark. I'm just going to read out, I know you've been replying to quite a few questions as they've been coming in during the webinar, but not everybody is always able to see the questions themselves. Sometimes people can only see the answers. So I'm just going to talk about some of the things that have come through here. Are fire-resistant undercoats worth the effort on timber, or is it better to replace it? And Mark's answer is the jury is still out. Australian standards are looking at undercoats, but you're recommending replace exposed timbers. Another question, accepting that embers are the #1 problem, what's the value in adding another water tank and getting a petrol-powered water pump? The answer for this one is great value, as the mains can actually go during a fire. So a primed petrol pump with water tanks is good value for ember protection. Okay, any other questions? I'm not sure if we've got any in the other section. Can you send information, RE hoses, etc., to all participants, please? Yes, so we will send out in the coming weeks a link to this recording. So if you want to watch it again, or if you've gotten together with some of your neighbours to create your neighbourhood bushfire plan, and maybe some of your neighbours missed it tonight, you'll be able to give them the link to the recording so they can watch it all again as well. And we will send out some links to some further information as well. But thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Mark. It's been a really informative webinar, and I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And I hope everyone logs onto the Climate Wise Communities website and starts their ready check soon. Thank you all for coming.